Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Paws for My Tail podcast. I am your host, Shepherd the Leopard, or Shep the Snep for short. And again, we are graced with the fantastic MtKanjon, or Kanjon for short. The last episode, we talked about kind of your introduction into the furry community at a kind of a later age than a lot of people experience that. And just how you kind of got started, some of the friends you met, some of the conventions you went into. For this episode, we're going to kind of talk about some of your experiences with figuring out your sexuality. As you started out, you mentioned from Ohio, you thought, oh, I was just a normal straight person, and how kind of struggling with that and how being in the furry community has helped influence how you feel about yourself in that regards. And then we'll also talk about how being in the fandom has helped you recognize that you have ADHD and how you've been able to address that. So let's go ahead and get started, Kanjon. Deep topics.
It's complicated. But at the same time, it's also almost not complicated, but it is. It's never one thing or the other, right? So yeah, I mean, like growing up through school and like even through college, I never really thought about sexuality. Like, it wasn't even like me going, oh, like, I'm not dating people. What's up with that? It was just like, I've got my own interests. And I'm like, I like to do the computer things. I like to do this and video games. It's like, that's what I'm focused on right now. And I'm sure once I get older, I'll start to care about the rest of that. Spoiler. No. So for the longest time, I just kind of like assumed like default straight. It's like, okay, that's me, but I, just don't care right now. I'll figure that out later. Because like in my head, it's like, I don't know, attraction to someone is like you make a specific intent to like go out and meet people and go on a date, and then you figure out what that means for yourself. And I just like that. It was like an activity for me almost. But an activity that I didn't do. And for such a long time, I just like was like, but then upon like once I graduated college, I'm like, a lot of friends I got have been going on dates, and like a couple of them like in college, like even like they're gonna get married. It's like, what? It's like, should I have been doing something? Did I miss something? Was I like, am I too late to do something here? I forget how I stumbled across this. It might have been Reddit, it might have been TV or something, but like I had heard about asexuality sometime before, and I think it was that one goddamn like House episode with the doctor. I've never watched House. My parents had it on once though, and they were talking about like asexuality, and I think like they actually did like this whole episode like by consulting people like with asexuality and or who are asexual, and tried to actually do the right thing with it. But then like the people writing the show were like, oh, this ending's not interesting, let's have it be this instead. And the thing that wasn't interesting to them was that like those two were ace. Like they're like, it can't just end like that. They're like, oh, there's got to be a twist. And it's like, oh, House was right. They weren't actually asexual. They just were repressing things because of some earlier thing or something like that. I don't remember the actual context of the episode. I never made a point to rewatch it. But it like lands like basically on a note of like trying to dismiss the existence of asexuality. And so like seeing that however many years prior, probably in high school or something, I don't know, just kind of put that aside in my head. Like I wasn't thinking about it applying to me. I didn't even know it was a thing. It's just like, it was on TV. They mentioned this thing and then they go, yeah, that's not it. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, it's like, is this a made up thing? Oh, okay. But I didn't look into it.
So we already established previously that, college Kanjon could be just a little dense. You see furries like, oh, that's cool. And you think nothing of it. in
Yes.
college and high school, did you have friends that would go dating? Was there like a dating culture at all? Did you watch movies where there was romance and the guy gets the
Oh my
girl
gosh,
and there's
yeah.
like this whole courting thing, like, and you just assume like that's just what people do, and it just doesn't never clicked, or like
I always like kind of thought like the romance thing in a lot of movies and like sex scenes and all that stuff was just like things that they did to make something entertaining. And it's like, yeah, I guess some people do that, but like that maybe they really, you know, up it for movies or music or whatever. It's like so many music or so much music is about like love and like having sex and everything. And the radio edits are bleeped, but it's definitely that. And it's like me, it didn't even hit me. I was just like, that's a song with lyrics. They're talking about weird things, but no. And like movies, like similar kind of thing. And with friends, like in high school, like I almost feel like I should reach out to some past people in high school and just see how they're doing. Cause like there's sort of this phenomenon that I wish I could find the source for this. There was like an actual study published in like a journal about this, about how people of and like LGBT, like in general, kind of sexuality tend to flock towards one another without knowing it, without any of them knowing that they are that. Like personalities match, activity choices and type of stuff start to match. And it turns out that like you find out your whole friend group is like gay or bi or ace or trans or anything like that. And it's like, what? How can this be? And it's like, well, that's actually like that's how a lot of that happens. And it's like I almost wonder if like my friends from high school, like if any of them are ace or something like that, because we sort of were similar.
Mhm.
None of us really dated. We just were the nerds in the group. And so yeah, there was definitely some interesting stuff along those lines. And some of that plays to like my friend groups today as well. Like a lot of them are LGBT of some sort. Like a few of them are straight and like boyfriend girlfriend, and you know they're a happy couple, and hey, that's great. And some of us have been like questioning things. Some of my friends, like when I kind of came out to them as ace, gosh, probably 5-6 years ago at this point, like they started to think about themselves, and it's like, oops, I might be ace too. And it's like they were like almost ashamed of it, because it not ashamed, like, but understandably shy, because they didn't want to be like copy. And like multiple friends, like it's like just because I was the first one to get to it, it's not like I have exclusive rights over
No.
you know being LGBT or something, right? But like it feels weird, right? Because it's like, oh, you did it, oh, me too, oh, me too.
You don't want to feel like you're being like reactive or just following the cool trend, right? You want to actually,
Yeah, which I
you
totally
want to
get.
actually
Yeah,
have something that's legitimately feels like it's you. So I get where your friends are coming from with that.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
When it comes to asexual or asexuality for you, though, do you want to kind of describe or define what that is?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then lots of times we talked about this during Chaotic's interview, but it can be a spectrum. Do you see yourself somewhere on that spectrum? Are you like definitive asexual, or do you kind of find yourself somewhere in between, or are you still figuring that out?
I'm a little bit still figuring it out. Let's work up to that, because like it'll help
Mm-hmm.
explain, I don't know, a good bit of my thinking on it, I guess. So there was that whole TV episode about that, and I kind of put that aside, and then yeah, go back to like sort of my post college years, and I don't know, I've never like really felt like I've been depressed necessarily. Certainly not diagnosed with it or anything, but um there was a year or two where I felt glum about sort of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not even glum, but just sort of like maybe a little bit of stress, because it's like, am I missing something of like a society expectation of me? Is this going to
Yeah.
be something that's going to cause problems for me? Um, and I think I had started to look at asexuality again around that time, and I was like, yeah, that's probably me. But I didn't really think enough about it. I was like, it's probably me, but and so like
Mm-hmm.
for a while I was just kind of like, maybe it's ace, maybe straight, just haven't figured it out yet. But like it was still kind of building in my head. Um And then I forget when specifically it was. I want to say, oh, probably about 7 years ago now. So a few years into work and whatnot. And I'm just like, you know, I'm probably just gay. Like, if I think about it, like this and this and this lines up with this person who I know is gay, and this and this and this. And so like I sort of tried on that label for like a year. I didn't really tell anyone, but tried it on for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I still didn't really feel differently about it. I'm like, well, I still don't really want to date. I still don't feel like I'm attracted to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
really. It's just, it's not something that comes up in my head. I like to do fun things and meet cool people and know the fun things that they're doing. Like make a lot of friends, but like as far as like being attracted to someone, it's like, well, it's not. This is
Mm-hmm.
not really there.
Did you ever feel pressured because of how much of a priority society puts on finding the one or getting coupled up or having these romantic relationships? Did that ever give you a sense of like pressure or maybe shame, or you talked to, a little bit of even depression because you weren't fulfilling those norms? And was that kind of what was causing a lot of this internal thought about really where you fell on that?
Yeah. So there was just a lot of times where I started to just sort of think about it more and more of like, we're gonna go like at work, we're gonna go do this happy hour. Oh, and those two are together. And I'm like, it's just like those little reminders in
Mm-hmm.
my head. I'm just like, ooh, hmm, what what am I doing? Or what am I not doing? And I remember, oh my gosh, I just remember that. So I think it was Valentine's Day. Um, I had to go pick up my contact lenses at the optometrist, which was like near my workplace. And I remember me and my coworkers had gone out to lunch, and like responsible adults working, we went to like a brunch place and got drunk on mimosas. Um, and so pretty tipsy and all that. And I'm like, we're walking back, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think they've called me to see if my contacts are ready yet, but I'm gonna go in there and check. Maybe they're there. It's been a bit. So I go in, they check, like, no, not yet, but maybe next day or two. I'm like, okay, thank you. Walk out. We're walking like sort of through the park back to the office, and someone's like shouting my name, and I like turn around, and it's this lady at the front desk, and she's going, "We actually do have your contacts." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll come get them." So we're walking back. It's just me and her. Like my coworkers were like, "Oh, Valentine's Day," and they're walking back to the office, and um, we're going back, and she's like very much giving lots of hints and signals and whatnot, and like enough that I even saw it as a dense ace person, and we're like walking back, and she's like, "Oh, I think that guy over there was hitting on me." I'm just like, Yep." And like she had like a ring on her finger, and like in hindsight, I think it was just like a decorative thing on like her middle finger or something like that. And like my ace ass rationalizes that as like, oh, she's probably married. Don't do that. And
Mhm.
it's like I'm just making up excuses in my head, I guess. And like I pick up the contacts and just like left.
Oh no.
And like afterwards, I'm like, I can never go back there again.
Do you look back now recognizing that you're ace and realize that there's probably more of those instances
Oh
that
my
have
gosh.
occurred than you realize, where
Yeah.
somebody was actively flirting or presenting like an interest in you
Oh yeah.
romantically or sexually, where it just did not register at all?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it occurred a good bit in high school and college as well. I can only think of specific instances, but like there's people that I had there that were like good friends, um, and were probably wanting to date or something. Some of
Hmm.
them may have also been ace too, who knows? But like it's just, it's just like, yep, hindsight. And I think it was sort of, it wasn't necessarily. Well, no. It was actually that event, that thing where I'm just like starting to think, okay, I'm probably just like gay or something. That's got to be it, right? But then like yeah, I'm trying it on, didn't really fit, and then I was just like, okay, I feel the same about men and women. I'm probably bi. But thought about that for a little bit, a shorter duration that time, like maybe a few months. And I was just like, no. And I was like, all right, fuck it. Let's figure this out. I'm gonna see what's going on here. I'm just going on Reddit. And
So you got your advice about where you fall on your your sexuality spectrum from Reddit.
yes,
Would
and
you
honest to
recommend
God,
that to
like
others? Like, was that a
maybe
good
not today.
experience?
Reddit kind of sucks now. You can't use third-party apps anymore. But um honestly, there were like three communities for like asexuality on Reddit that were like super like meaningful and impactful for a
Hmm.
lot of people, myself included. One of them just a meme one. It's like you look at the memes and it's like if you look at that meme and you feel offended by it, it probably describes you. Um, which I'll mention that a few times later for like ADHD and stuff too. But like um, for the asexuality stuff, it's like I was just kind of browsing through posts on. There's a few ace subreddits. I forget which one it was, but which is also a fun thing. Ace being short for asexuality. Ha, that's cool.
Hmm.
Um, and browsing through a lot of those and just reading people's stories and just once again kind of feeling like I was reading a journal that someone else was writing for, but it was me. And I'm like, ah, how does this describe me so well? How does it feel like I wrote this? Um, and I was like, wait, these things, that, and that, they're not just, normal things or whatever, for whatever definition of normal.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh fuck. That's me. And then one thing I saw, like, I think that same day, just scrolling through, because I was like kind of just fascinated with this, I guess. Was people were talking about a black ring. Um, and it's a black ring that you wear on your middle finger.
Oh no.
On has nothing to do with the Valentine's Day,
Okay, I thought
honestly.
it might have
Thankfully,
been the girl. You
no,
were
no, no,
just like,
no. I remember that was not a black ring on it. Um, and of your right hand, because like I guess in like sort of the symbolism of things, left hand typically represents like sort of permanent things, where right may be temporary. And
Mhm,
so like asexuality is a thing that for many people is a permanent thing, but for some people they're kind of figuring it out, and it's kind of a fluid thing. Some
mhm,
people, they may think it's a permanent thing for years, and then it changes a little bit. And yeah, okay. But I was like, yeah, that's cool. It's like you don't have to wear a ring to be ace, right? Like, but it's like that's a cool like both like conversation piece kind of thing, and also just like a fun little reminder. It's neat. And like other things that I just sort of thought were neat, like Esperanto and learning to draw and all that stuff, I'm just like, I want to get one. I'm gonna do that too. So I got one. Um, and then I remember being at Buffalo Wild Wings with some friends, and they saw the ring. They're like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna have to get me a little drunk first for that." And so we did. And I told them, and like that was sort of me coming out to a couple friends there. And then I started to feel a little more comfortable with it, and like told more of my friend group more and more, and like yeah, everyone knows I'm ace now. Um, and like yeah, it was a very like sort of shy sort of start to that line of thinking, but they were all very like supportive and very interested in it. And like years down the line, I've got a couple friends who are ace now, and like I friends who are lesbian, friends who are gay, like bi, like all of it pretty much. And it's
mhm,
like it's not my doing. They would have figured it out on their own too. But it's
yeah,
like it was fun to kind of be the first person to sort of I guess out myself there,
mhm,
and see that progress. And like I had a friend who um, kind of knew they were gay from a lot earlier on, but never really told anyone. And me being dense again, didn't really see it. Um, and they sort of figure out like, oh, like they're when they sort of like kind of came out as ace almost, like they're like, oh yeah, well I was felt kind of like gay, but maybe like demi ace or something. And I'm
mhm,
like, oh, I didn't know about the first part, but the second part, hey, cool, that's neat. Um, but yeah, I thought that always like just really cool, because it's like you see all your friends figuring their own things out about themselves, and it's similar to who you are.
mhm,
And like, of course, like being ace or being gay or bi or anything is not like the core part of your being. It's not like it's not what defines you, but it is a significant part of your life because it's like it affects like your relationships and what you do with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so just like being able to have a friend group that like is not only very supportive of that, but also turns out same kind of thing going on is like, wow, that's super cool.
So there's this idea that people that are in the LGBTQ community or that discover that they're in that community or identify with it, that they're kind of delayed relationship wise by a certain amount of time, be it a decade, longer, shorter, before they really start to fall into what other more normie people experience. Do you see that with yourself where maybe now you're starting to like get to where you're experimenting with that a little bit, you're feeling that out a little bit more, where before it just never was a thing? You kind of, does that ring true for you, I guess?
Yeah. Like I've always sort of described well, not always, but since I've figured out being ace, I've sort of described myself as arrow ace,
Mm-hmm.
aromantic, asexual. So like there's sort of two axes to a spectrum here, more than that even, but like it's how much you're attracted to someone and then like how much you are sort of attracted to relationships really. So like how much of a romantic attraction you have to someone versus a sexual attraction. And most people like if you're straight, you just kind of assume it's just attraction. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. For a lot of people, that is the thing. But it's just starts to break apart in so many ways that it can get confusing if you're not aware that there's like different levels of romanticism versus sexuality versus other mix-ins to all that sort of thing, especially when we talk about ace. And I think over time I've started to figure out like I'm still pretty damn asexual. Like it's hard to break out of that one. I think I've never been able to convince myself otherwise. But like
Mm-hmm.
on the romanticism side, like well, hey, I don't know if romanticism is a word, but I'm gonna use it. It's um I've always thought I was like maybe like 95% aromantic or something, and like I almost feel like that slider's going down a little bit. Like maybe there's something
Mm-hmm.
there, and I'm just kind of like at the point where it's like it's not that I don't care about it again, like sort of back earlier in my life where I'm just like, I'll deal with it later. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like it changes, and that doesn't really bother me because
Yeah.
it's a thing that is I'm understanding to just sort of be fluid. Like you discover more about what you like, you discover more about like friends and what they like, and you're like, oh, maybe something there.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like just sort of on that spectrum, it's like I still would use the term arrow ace, but um, there's a little bit of a question mark box
Yeah.
inside of that, and that's fine.
Yep.
Um,
I would agree with that because, from my own experience, growing up, I thought I was a certain way. And then when I start getting a little older, I feel like I'm maybe fit into this category. But then as years go by, I'm like, well, maybe. That's is the weird thing, because you're like, was I always in this category? Or is this something that has kind of evolved as I've gotten older, where now I find myself, in another box? And so I think it is important to be open and fluid, as you say, with allowing yourself to not fully understand yourself, to be open to maybe
part of the fun.
I'm something else altogether. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's just a continual process of life discovery, figuring ourselves out. So
yeah, it's really nice, and like yeah, it's I mean, yeah, like I said, it's been fun to talk about that with friends, and even like randomly, it'll come up with conversation with strangers. They'll see my ring, go, "Oh, what's that? Is that like one of those fitness tracking rings?" I'm like, "Oh no, you heard of asexuality?" Sometimes I'm really awkward about it because I'm like completely caught off guard. One time, I was just trying to order a drink up at the bar at a tap room, and they're asking about it. I'm like, "Oh, no, it's asexuality. Also, can I get the pilsner?" um, it's They're like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Yep." But sometimes I tell it to people and they're like, "Oh shit, I got a friend like that." Like, I mean, honestly, my older sister, she's like, "Oh, what?" This is like completing the thing. This is like I got another friend who's like pan, and this friend's lesbian, this friend's gay. She's like, "Here's Ace." There we go. I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome."
Mhm.
And like, I mean, telling my parents too. Like they've been supportive. They were, kind of questioning it a little bit because that was their first time hearing about it. But like similarly, like I had the ring, and I don't necessarily know how if I would have ever brought that up to them outside of that context. Like maybe I would have.
Do you want to go in and actually describe your experience? Like, how did that go down? Like,
Yeah.
what brought on that conversation? How did they react?
Yeah. So I was going home for, I think it was for Christmas, and I was debating on whether or not I would wear the ring. And I was like, maybe this is the thing that I keep in Seattle. Maybe I don't know, maybe. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm an adult. I'm me. My parents think I'm gay. I'm pretty sure they did, but like this will be a fun twist to that. So yeah, I wore that, and like, of course, my mom spots it right away. She asked about that. It might have even been in the car on the way back from the airport when they picked me up or something. And so like I explained it, and she's like, huh. And she like ends up like looking up stuff about it and learned about that. My dad notices it a good bit later, I think, because my mom might have prompted him to ask about it, because I think he simply didn't notice. I like, honest to God, like if my friends are wearing like new apparel or something, I'm kind of dense about it still too. Like I'm like, oh, neat, and like they'll bring up like the cool bracelet they're wearing or something. I'm like, oh, what? I didn't notice that. That's neat as hell. But, for the most part, like I don't notice it, and I think my dad's like that too. And so like I think it was like right before we went to like this like Christmas church service thing, which like I was never super religious growing up, and that didn't really change. And even like my parents kind of stopped really going to church because it was sort of just like a social thing for them. But like we were kind of going to like the Christmas service as like almost like an obligation, and I was like, okay, we're going there. Other people are going to see this thing. Some of them might know what it means. Some of them are going to ask. And I'm like, I got to tell my dad. So I was like, as we're going to get into the car to go to this thing, I'm like, hey, by the way, this thing means I'm asexual. Bye. Whatever the car is like, wait, no, you can't just do that. No. It's okay. So he, of course, had questions on the drive over there. And yeah, we talked about it a lot. And like for a year after that, my parents were still like, you sure about that kind of thing? Because like I remember one time we went on like a ski trip in Colorado, which was very fun. I used to ski a ton. Like one day I skied like 30 days in the season or something. Really into it. Had not too much anymore, but I still kind of want to do it. But we were doing a ski trip there, and I remember getting breakfast in Denver as we're going from like the airport to like Frisco or something where we were staying. And what was it? There was like my sister was showing me something, and I made a pun about it, like a dick joke or something.
Oh, no.
This is like amazing. Like it's not like I can't make dick jokes. It's funny.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, haha. I'm like, well, no,
that proves it. You have to understand from your normal person's point of view, like attraction is a fact of life. Like everybody is just assumed that guys like gals and gals like guys, and there's that innate like drive that's just always there. And so for a lot of people that try to describe asexuality, it can be a very, very foreign idea for a lot of people. So I'm sure that's something that your parents probably had to wrestle with quite a bit.
Oh yeah. It was especially sort of something for I don't know, I guess my parents, because like it wasn't like they were demanding that I have kids or something, which I am very grateful for. Like that would have been a lot of added stress. But like in terms of like my last name, it's sort of a rare last name, and there's only one other person in my extended family who would like carry on that last name, having kids, and I don't even know if he has, honestly. But it's like it ain't gonna be me. So like, well, is this the end of that? And I'm like, well, yeah, but does it really matter? I was like, well, I guess not. And so yeah, there's definitely some aspects where like they were sort of rationalizing a lot of that stuff, but they're very, that now, and they know that like um they know to not like bring it up with other people unless I say it first, but they
Hmm.
also know that I might bring it up anyway, and like it's fine. Like my extended family, no, I'm not gonna tell them. There's some bigots out there, but
Hmm.
we'll leave that one. But no, yeah, my parents have been very supportive of it, which I'm very very thankful for. And I've talked with some of my friends about like whether they've sort of come out to their parents as well, and some have, and some haven't, and it's like you don't have to. It's
Hmm.
can be, but yeah,
Yep. Everybody's going to find themselves in a different circumstance. And so you got to figure out what's going to be best for that circumstance that you're in, whether that's you tell your parents, you tell a sibling that's a little bit more trustworthy and open to that kind of thing, or you just tell a friend. But it can be a very difficult decision to make, who to actually trust with that knowledge about yourself. So
yeah,
totally
yeah.
get that.
But yeah, it's had its fun aspects too. Like, I mean, certainly again, things are fluid. Things can always like change about me and about like my sexuality and all that. But like, at least for like the past decade, I have been able to basically focus all my attention on hobbies and friends and work and whatnot, the things that you need and the things that you like.
Hmm.
Whereas like some friends like get into relationships and like they're spending a lot of their time on the relationship, and it's like, well, yes, they love to do that. That's fantastic. But at the same time, they're like, oh, don't have the time to do all these hobbies. Um, and I'm like, yeah, and like I remember having a fun conversation with friends at one point, and we were just talking about so many different things like that, just getting really into the weeds with like sexuality and all that stuff. And they're like, oh my gosh, like you got like a superpower of not having a relationship and just being able to do all these things. And I was just like, yep, it's very fun.
Is it the relationship itself that seems to be what's taking up so much time, or is it some of the other things that like children, or because like lots of times relationships you can share a lot of the things that you really enjoy with that person, and then it doesn't become like an expensive time. It becomes an addition of
Yeah, yeah,
interest and
certainly.
companionship.
No, yeah, like a couple of my friends are in relationships, and like, yeah, they're perfect for each other, and like be like, yeah, they both have like different kinds of hobbies that come together and let them do so many different things,
Hmm.
and it's really cool. Um, but yeah, similarly, like a lot of it is also not having kids. None of my like close friends have kids either. I don't know if that's a thing for them. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm suspecting probably not for most, because again, we're of similar mindsets about a lot of things. Um, and so like yeah, it's like for some of them, like relationship or not, they can spend a lot of time doing hobbies and stuff with each other because there's no kids to take care of. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't think kids are ever going to be a thing for me particularly, um, yeah, I'm just like, yeah, I don't need to spend the time on that. But like even even just on like relationship sides, like going in and out of relationships, like you got to spend time dating, you got to spend time really getting to know people, and like if you're in the early stages of dating, just like doing lots of them if you're like actively seeking that kind of thing. And I
Mhm.
have friends that have done that, and it's like, hey, that's really cool. You're really going out there. It's like I don't have the courage to do that. It's like the idea of making a Tinder account to me is so foreign. It's just not going to happen. Um, but at the same time, like I don't know. It's like if I see someone and I meet someone that I really like, it's like, would I be open to the idea of dating? Yeah, I think I could probably do that. Would I know what I'm doing? Probably not. Whatever. It's there. It is.
Mhm.
Um,
Just a little inside information. Very few actually do know what they're doing,
yeah, and
regardless of their orientation.
I think sort of like with a lot of my hobbies, like if I were to ever like not like if I were to ever, but even like if I were the kind of person that was going out to go like intentionally do a bunch of dates and find people, like I would probably approach it with a mindset of I don't know what I'm doing, and that's fun.
Hmm.
Because like that is the fun part of life, is not knowing what you're doing and just seeing what happens. Like do your best to be a good person and be fun and all that, but like sometimes things don't work. It's like, ah, well, oops. But yeah, it's yeah, a lot of fun there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot about being ace. But there's always like different spectrums to that. People have many different experiences. That's just mine.
Yep.
And so if you feel like you're ace, but my experience doesn't line up, you could still be ace. It's different.
Yep. So you have discovered that you're asexual. Being part of the fandom has probably helped a little bit with that, meeting other people that, share that experience. Do you want to also talk about how the fandom has helped you understand other parts about who you are? Like, maybe like ADHD or something along those lines.
Yeah. So, oh, yeah, the ADHD bit. Yeah, I hadn't even like thought about this growing up. Like, there was a point, when, I was probably like 8 or 9 or something, where my parents had me on some kind of like pre-market drug to help you focus, but it wasn't Adderall or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a controlled substance. It was something that was authorized for testing, but wasn't like approved by the FDA. And I don't think it ever did get approved because it was basically just like vitamins.
Oh no.
Which is, and I'll get into the vitamins bit too because that comes up later. But um, like it wasn't harmful, but like it also just didn't do anything. And so my parents were like, yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. That. And like for me, being the nerdy kid that just likes computers and was getting decent grades in school, it's like doesn't really matter, right? Like doing fine. And for the longest time, like that was my life. It's like, yeah, college, it was a little harder because I kind of actually had to study at that point. Whereas high school I was like, I didn't do the homework and I just kind of did fine on the tests, which is a common pattern of ADHD apparently. And then you get to college and it's like, oh shit, got to actually memorize the stuff and figure out how to do it. So there's a little bit of an adjustment there, but I could still do it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I got my job and I was doing fine with it. Like a lot of distractions that would come up, but I still got stuff done. And it turns out hindsight, the tech industry is just filled with people with ADHD, undiagnosed, not. So there's a common pattern there. So you'd kind of meet the bar at that. And I was just like, I never thought about it. Again, sort of like asexuality. I did not think about it. I was like, no, this is how people are. This is me.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that a lot of the things that I just thought were normal people things, no, not really. So I think it was 3 years ago that I really started to think about this. And I had some friends from this furry art school server, and we were kind of talking about ADHD. And then a couple of them were like, yeah, I probably got it. I can't do this or this and this. And I'm like, oh, wait, I thought no one really could like focus on that sort of thing for a long period of time. Like, yeah. And then like we got to like the point of sharing those like Mimi bingo board type things where it's not even like if you Google ADHD bingo board, you're going to get bad resources about like parenting and if your child has ADHD and all that. Don't look at those.
There's a lot of content out there that's just marketed to make money on that ADHD and people that have it. So you do have to be careful about the source that you're getting your information from.
That, and it's very different for adults versus kids in terms of like the signs of ADHD externally. If you have ADHD and you get diagnosed with it, you basically had it your whole life. You just started to actually figure that shit out now. And like a lot of adults are figuring that out now. Like it's becoming more documented. People are like doing more research online about this. People are talking to each other. And so there's like a lot more knowledge about it. And it's like, oh yeah, a lot more adult diagnoses are coming out, not because people are like, suddenly developing ADHD. It's just we're realizing there was a huge amount of the population that has had it. And
people that have had ADHD you just cope with it, right? You don't know too much different because nobody has said otherwise. You just assume that you're just not as good at certain things as maybe such and such is when it comes to focusing or getting things done on time, or
it was also like trade-offs, right? Like you weren't as good at certain things, but you felt like you were better at others because like when you did focus, you could focus a lot and get something done really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time it's like getting yourself to do the task is jumping between many different things that you're procrastinating on. All of them are things that you want to do, even, or at least get out of the way. And you have to wait until the very last moment before something's due before you finally go and do it. And then you're like, why did I do that? And yeah, just looking at like these bingo boards, it's like, I think they were on Reddit. Like, you got to go to ADHD memes. You got to find the ones that are the most shit posty, similar to asexuality. You find the ones and you look at them, and if you feel offended by it, like, I remember looking at one of these bingo boards and going, what the fuck? Are you fucking serious? Like, I've got like 4 bingos on this thing, and why aren't these normal? So I was like, okay, what the heck? And I remember reading this when I was like in a taxi on the way back to the airport at the end of a work trip. And I like distinctly remember that location of doing this, which, sort of a side note, like, I have this, I don't know, I associate a lot of my memories with locations of where I learned or did that fact for some reason. That's kind of how I help recall it. And they almost have like a taste to them, which is kind of weird. Never really looked into that one much. Might be something related to like a synesthesia, but then I started to find other people that sort of had that sort of thing going on. I was like, yeah, that kind of thing. But that's just a fun little sidebar. That's, I don't know, fun things that brains do, I guess. But like, yeah, I remember this like specifically happening in that taxi, and I was just like texting people on Discord. We're looking through these memes. I'm like, oh fuck, maybe I do. And I ended up going to the doctor, I don't know, a month or 2 later, just for like a general physical, not for that. I didn't ask about it at all because, like, I was like, I'm still figuring that shit out, and I don't really know how to approach that. Like, do I just ask the doctor? Turns out, spoiler, yes, that's all you do to start that. And I like got my blood tests done and all that stuff, and he's like, yeah, generally looking good, but like, I always recommend my patients do like all these omega-3 stuff, like do a multivitamin. You're living in Seattle, you're probably going to need to be taking some vitamin D. So here's some recommendations. I'm like, you know what? I'll finally, do this stuff, and I will go take my vitamins and do that and be in good health, because I should be doing that because I don't exercise enough. And so I did. And like, I still take all these pills today. Like, I think it's a good idea as well. Get your, healthy blood and all that medical words. But shortly after like starting to take those vitamins, like a few weeks in, I'm like, man, I feel like I can focus and I'm actually getting things done. Did I just have a vitamin deficiency? And I was like, well, huh. And so like, I was kind of telling these same friends about this. I'm like, I'm not like, invalidating ADHD or something, but like, I just don't know if it actually is me. Cause like, ever since I've actually started following my doctor's advice on or like vitamins and whatnot, I have felt a little better. And, but I think in hindsight, really what was going on was I had a project at work that was actually interesting coming up that had a lot of varied hard problems in it. A lot of them that were urgent, because we had a customer at work that was like a big, massive customer, and they wanted to do all these things with our product. This is the small business thing. So maybe not that small of a business with that one, but they wanted to do all these things, and they were all like last minute things. And they were like, oh yeah, Kanjon can do those things. Kanjon knows how the random things work and can do the random things because that's what he does. And I'm like, yep, give them to me. So like, sort of the urgency of every little minute task had me doing lots of different things. And like, I got a lot of good feedback about that at work. They're like, yeah, you did really well on this thing. I'm like, thank you. But I thought it was like, just, oh yeah, I'm focusing better because of the vitamins. But winter rolls around, and that project's basically done. And we're figuring out, what are we doing for the next year? I'm like, well, I'm on my vitamins. We can actually focus on things. And then I'm starting to realize, I'm not like,
wasn't working quite as well.
That focus isn't there. I'm like, maybe this is me again.
And that's not to discount, though, the fact that like good health and nutrition and sleep can help with a lot of these symptoms that people deal with, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD disorders. But it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
disorder is still not there. That all those symptoms are just going to vanish because you're in better health, which is what it sounds like you were then starting to experience.
Yeah. And like the vitamins have actually like have had provable effects on like my health. Like my blood test results are better.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I like this is maybe a bit anecdotal, but like I just sort of feel healthier, right? Like it's like there's stuff to that. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing this because like maybe it'll keep me healthy, maybe it's gonna help my immune system. Yes, we'll keep doing that. And that's why I still do that today. But then I was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go see like does ADHD really describe me? I'm like, okay, yeah, I think it does. Um, but then I didn't really do anything about it. Which is a very typical ADHD thing is to think that you have it and then not want to spend the time to do it because it just seems like such a gigantic thing to open up to have to deal with. And so like, I don't want to do it. It's like, yeah, I probably got it, but eh. And it took me about, I think it was another year of doing that to finally go, all right, okay, figure this out. I ended up getting a new job this year, really, and uh, switched on to that health insurance. And I'm like, okay, while we're doing this, I'm going to book a doc appointment. But the thing that actually had me booking a doctor's appointment wasn't actually the ADHD thoughts. It was I kept waking up recently, like around that time with like a lot of back pain that was like kind of keeping me from sleeping. But it was only while I was asleep, so there's weird stuff with that. That's more or less resolved. Had to go to physical therapy, but it turns out I wasn't exercising enough. Surprise.
Is this the universal symbol for physical therapy?
Yeah, that could be a weird gesture. Right? Exercise bands or stretchy bands. You just pull apart and exercise your shoulders. That, more or less. Again, not medical advice. If you got to look back, go talk to your doctor first. But like I was at the point where I was like, this hurts. I need to talk to the doctor about this. Let's go make an appointment. So I did that. We did the general checkup and all that stuff. And just at the end of it, I was like, by the way, I was kind of curious about like ADHD and like kind of exploring what that means like as an adult. And my doctor, she's just like, oh, I do like ADHD diagnoses. I'm qualified to do that. I'm like, oh. She's like, yeah, just book like a video call and we can do one like next week. I was like, that easy? Okay. So I did, and we did that first video call, and she kind of goes through sort of like a bunch of questions and like, if do you feel like you do this thing a lot? Do you feel like you have a bunch of to-do lists? I think was one of them, and I'm like, oh, I have so many. That apparently is a sign of them. Is not just having a to-do list, but having lots of to-do lists. It can be a factor. And again, there's different types of ADHD. So like, if you don't make a bunch of to-do lists, doesn't mean you don't necessarily have it, but that, at least for me, that was a big sign. There was me sort of feeling distracted in like conversations and being unable to pay attention to people, me losing train of thought a lot and having to stop and ask, which was just fucking hilarious when I was on that call with my doctor, because she asked me the question of, do you often feel like you have trouble paying attention even when someone is speaking directly to you? And I'm like, well, maybe because such and such and such. And then I like kind of get to the end of my little sidebar and like try to wrap things up and go back to the original topic. And then I'm like, I actually forgot what we were talking about.
Oh, no.
Can you mention? She's like, do you have trouble paying attention? And I'm like, oh shit, I swear I didn't mean to do that on purpose. And she's like, that's okay. That's actually a common thing that happens when we do these. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, that sort of thing happened. She's very nice, and that was very, very, I don't know. I felt like I could be very honest about all that stuff. Which, like, if you're talking to your doctor about ADHD, you don't want to you don't want to like defend yourself and make you make you look good. This isn't like a job interview. You don't also want to like you obviously don't want to lie, because then you're going to get the wrong kind of diagnosis and something that's not going to work for you. But like you want to be as candid as you can about your life and how you think having ADHD impacts you.
And the goal of a diagnosis is not to prove yourself right or wrong that you have something, or even to put a label necessarily to something, but it's to get help with whatever you're dealing with.
Figure that shit out.
Yeah, and so you want the doctor to get it correct, you don't want to lead them on to whatever
Exactly,
thing you think it's going to be. I had a friend that he was younger. He thought, well, he had caught wind that his parents was having him diagnosed for some disorder, and he thought to himself, well, I don't want to have this disorder. I don't want to be labeled as such. And so he purposely led on questions that weren't truthful, but that he thought would be what they were looking for. And so he didn't get diagnosed, when later he then needed to go in and get that solved because it was a problem that he had constantly been dealt with. So I agree with you. Like, go in as yourself. The goal is to figure it out, not to necessarily convince the doctor that you do or don't have something.
Yeah, like very much that. And like to that point, like that was the first call of two, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me, okay, so next steps is we're gonna go ahead and book another call for like a week from now. And by the end of that call, we'll have a decision, like you will have a diagnosis or not then. I'm like, okay. Which, causes all sorts of nervous thoughts in your head at that point. But she said, like, we're also going to kind of look at like anxiety and depression, because those are also commonly associated with it. And she was very clear upfront. She's like, it's not going to be like we're going to point at those and go, you have that instead of ADHD, but we want to make sure we've covered all those bases and figured out, all the things that are going on. Like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she did also tell me at the beginning of that call, highly indicative of ADHD. I'm like, okay, so here we go. She also recommended, like, if I could, like, try to get stories from like my parents or anything like that about me as a child in those kinds of situations. And I was like, okay. So I like texted my mom. I'm like, so I'm looking at an ADHD diagnosis, and they are just want to know about like stories from childhood about like times that I was like, distracted or this or that and that. And my mom like replies with like, oh, I didn't really think ADHD was you, but here's a bunch of things that you did. And it's like very clear ADHD patterns. I'm like, well, there we go. And I was like texting back, and she's like, but these are just normal people things. And I'm like, that just means you probably have it too. I think, yeah. So, because it being like, I think there's a lot of evidence towards ADHD being like a very genetic kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, there's like sort of some clear patterns that you can kind of establish with that. But yeah, like I had some stories from mom, and I think like one of them was like the fact that I had to figure out how everything worked, all the way back to me as a toddler, crying about not being able to figure out how the drawers in a store worked. Like that was one of them. Another example that she had, and I actually remember doing this, was the screening for kindergarten, where they kind of figure out where you're at, if you're ready for kindergarten and all that stuff. They have you, count your numbers, do your alphabet, do 3 skips, do some jumps, use these scissors to cut out the triangle out of the paper or something. And I distinctly remember using my left hand to use the scissors. I'm right-handed. Because I wanted to see if I could do it. And like
That's an ADHD thing?
Well, sort of. But like not that specifically, but like the fact that I got distracted from the goal of them just trying to see where I was, because I'm just a kid, right? Like I just wanted to try to use scissors in the other hand. And that was like written on the form of like, tried to use wrong hand or cut with wrong hand or whatever. And my mom even sent a picture of that. I'm like, oh, that's fucking hilarious. I remember doing that. So yeah, like stuff like that of just like getting distracted from like the real thing that you're doing to do the random other thing that's here. That's like the little sub problems.
This has been the second episode, or the second interview in which we've covered this topic, and twice now I've been comparing myself to what's been said. And it's like, oh no, when I was a kid, we would play baseball, and instead of focusing on the actual game, I'd be out there chasing butterflies because it was more interesting. And then it's like, oh, there's the ball. Okay, I guess it's my time to go chase it.
Gosh, yeah, I did baseball as a kid too. I hated that. Yeah, I get all those sort of stories together. I had them written down on my notepad because I'm like, I'm gonna need to make sure I go through these when we're doing these. And she's asking me more questions, and honestly, it was kind of a short call. Like I read out sort of, the stories from my parents and all that stuff. And she asked us like a few more questions, and then she's like, "Okay, based on this, there's enough evidence to give you an ADHD diagnosis." I was like, "Holy shit!" And then like right then, she's like, "The options, knowing this, are like one of them is sort of like therapy and figuring out like the kinds of behaviors to help you cope with that, and the other option, the one that I recommend, is medication." And I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about that." And we went through the options for that, and it turns out there's actually like a ton of different kinds of ADHD meds, some that are stimulant, some that are non-stimulant. Typically, I guess like this non-stimulant's more useful for children. For adults, she's just recommending stimulant. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, let's give it a shot. And like sends a prescription over to the pharmacy. I go get it like that day even. Um, and I tried it out. Honestly, I had to ask on that call like about the medication. Like she's like, do a trial period, like maybe on the weekend if you're not sure how it's going to interact with things at work. Kind of try to note down like any side effects you might notice. Like dry mouth's a really common one there. Sort of jitteriness, elevated heart rate's a really common one for the one that I'm on. And just note that down. And I'm like, what about just sort of being in large social situations? Like, do you think that would be problematic if I were to try this out for the first time? She's like, no, not really. I was like, specifically, I'm going to go to like a convention with a lot of people. I did not tell her it was a furry convention. It was Vancouver was that one. And I had tried it for the first time there, and like, I specifically remember we were like in the hotel room, and I had that, and like 30 minutes later, I'm just talking with a friend there. We're having like coffee or something, and I just suddenly just feel like this wave of like calmness, like as all of the thoughts that were bouncing around in my head that I just kind of gotten used to and didn't even really like notice just kind of went away. And it wasn't like I suddenly lost something or couldn't remember things or anything like that. It's just the noise was gone, like so suddenly. I was like, what the fuck? And that kind of persisted throughout most of the day. It definitely weakened towards the end
Mhm.
of the day. And like there was a certain point of the day, and this kind of occurred for the first couple of weeks of using this, was like there's a specific time of the day where the meds stop and you feel it. And it's this chill that you feel again, as like you almost feel like your brain's like shut off for like 30 seconds. Like you're still there. You're not like blacking out or anything. But like I felt like almost sleepy, like awake but sleepy in a way.
Mhm.
And then I felt like I was back to my usual goofy, distracted self. I was like, whoa, that's weird. And over time doing that and talking with the doctor, and like we've adjusted the dosage amounts as I've sort of gotten used to it, made sure there were no bad side effects or anything.
Mhm.
Um, I've sort of hit the level for me, and I'm at the point where I can skip it for a day or two or three or four even, and like I'll still sort of feel the persistent effects of it. So I don't
Oh,
really have
wow.
that crash at the end of it anymore. It's always kind of there. If I do skip it for a long enough time, like I've skipped it on a vacation for like a week plus or so, like there is sort of a ramp up a little bit getting back into it, but it's nowhere near like the initial several weeks of figuring that out.
Mhm.
And I feel like skipping it, I can still do my work, and it's fine. Like there's definitely more when I have it,
Mhm.
but when I don't have it, it's just my body's kind of gotten used to sort of that in some way. Probably some physiological way of how all that stuff works. Something dopamine. Um, but like yeah, it's really neat because like I thought that this was a very on and off drug. But now I've sort of found the part where like there isn't a day where the meds don't work. They seem to work every time, and again I can like skip days and it's kind of still there, and yet I don't feel like overly jittery or anything like that. It just feels like I can do the thing that's in front of me, and it's so weird being able to do that in a way. It's it's sort of changed things about how I like work and also how I like organize my life, which is
Mhm.
interesting. It's definitely changed about how I prioritize things, because I feel like a big thing about the medication is it doesn't really make it so that I can do more. Because when I have, untreated ADHD, I was doing the same amount of stuff just in a random haphazard order, bouncing back and forth, doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And procrastinating. And like, again, the stress levels kind of just sort of built up till you do it. But now I can actually just sit down and do the thing. It's done. We go on to the next one. I can do it before it's due. It's great. Been able to organize a project at work because of that. It's very nice. But it's changed how I prioritize things at home as well. Because I've started to realize that it's not like I can't suddenly do all these things on my task list all at once. It's that I realize that some of the things on that list aren't important and they fall off. Like in my head, even I don't even like manually prioritize my list of things. There are things that I actually start to forget about. Like I used to not forget about things. I've actually started to forget about things because they're not that important in my head. Sometimes they are actually important. One time it bit me. So I am actually a little bit worse about checking my reminders on my phone because I'm always like focused on what's in front of me, like conversation, what I'm doing at work, talking with friends, tinkering with, I don't know, my patio furniture or something. I don't know.
Are you saying the compulsion to just check your Telegram messages as soon as you hear that ping could be a symptom of ADHD? For you at least?
Maybe not. But like, yeah, that's gone. Like I am so bad about checking Telegram and like notifications and whatnot now that I like have started to turn the sounds back on my phone because like I won't notice it.
Has that helped your ability to be an artist, being diagnosed and having that medication, or has it been about the same? Like talking about art, like has that influenced that at all?
I feel like, yeah, I would do art sometimes as one of those ways of avoiding doing another task. But then I would also do other tasks as a way of avoiding doing art because it's like it's always things that you want to do, but you don't want to sit down and start it because it's always the start. Once you get past the 5 minutes of starting the task, you can do it. Like that was me unmedicated and it was fine. And I would always like be hitting myself because I'm like, I just have to sit down and do it. It's right there. But now it's like there's still a little bit of I don't know, a hesitation sometimes to starting a task, especially if I've just been doing a lot in the day and I recognize that I'm tired or something. But I do know that I can sit down in front of a task that I have no context built up in my head about what it is or anything. And I can just do it. I'll just go right at it. So like with art, I have to make sure I'm spending intentional time to do art because like if I don't like pencil in time on my personal little reminders, I would probably not do it. However, I've gotten far enough in sort of like my practicing of art that it sort of is a natural thing that I sort of gravitate to when there's an empty space. Like, oh yeah, I'll probably go draw after this or something like that. But it also means that while I am drawing, I will spend a lot more time on one thing, which is a very good thing. Like I used to not be able to draw one piece of art for more than like an hour or two, like combined, whether it's across, multiple sessions or just all at once. I'd be like, all right, I've done enough and I am done. I have no interest in trying to refine this. This is good enough, or I don't know how to really make this any better. So that's it. That's what I'm going to share. There was a lot of times where I would abandon a drawing, like when it was sort of done, but like I could have probably tried more with it. But nowadays I can just start that drawing and do a lot of it and go even beyond where I thought I was going to go with it because I want to try a new brush, I want to try a new technique, and I can like actually learn just by drawing something. I feel like I spend less time doing lessons in art studies now, and I don't necessarily know if that's an effect of my medication, meaning that I don't do that like randomly, or if it's because I've sort of gotten to a point in my art where I feel confident enough that I'm learning just by doing the art itself and kind of doing referencing and studying. Maybe a little bit of it. The lessons will probably still benefit me. I should probably still do them. And my big pile of things that need to get done, especially with my whole like video series thing,
which we'll talk about soon. But it sounds like that ADHD medication has helped you prioritize a lot of those things on your long list to do, which is pretty awesome.
So much. Yes, it's been so great. And I've had friends locally that I've convinced to seek out diagnoses and get medicated as well, and at least 2 of them have done just that. They also didn't really know that they had ADHD behaviors, but have figured it out, and they've also been like, holy shit, it could have always been like this.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's been neat.
Oh, cool. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end this episode. Thanks everybody for watching, and thank you again, Kanjon, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll do one more episode after this one, I imagine, because we still have to talk about your journey with art and the art YouTube channel that you have.
Ooh, YouTube,
definitely a lot to
that?
talk about there. What is YouTube?
Not real.
No,
can't hurt you.
we're just a figment of your imagination. But thank you for watching. If you liked what you watched, again, like and subscribe. It helps us a ton. And we look forward to seeing you with one more episode with Kanjon on Paws for Your Tail Paws for My Tail. Well, I guess it's your tail too. Paws for My Tail podcast. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.